Hi, welcome to Expert Talks at Mavris. This is the interview series with leaders in the AI, analytics, and transformation space. My name is Mahadevann Iyerr, Mahaa for short. I'm your host for today. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mavris, which is a managed marketplace for on-demand analytics and business transformation services. Our guest for today is Vinodh Ramachandran. Vinodh is the head of data science and analytics at Neiman Marcus. Prior to Neiman Marcus, Vinod was the site leader and DVP at Saks of Fifth. He used to lead all the business function, including analytics for that. He's also had a distinguished career in analytics at Lowe, Target, and Genpact. Vinod speaks frequently at industry forums on the evolving role of AI and how context is very important to make business impact. I've heard few of your interviews and presentations, then we'll talk about that in a little while. Thanks for making time and talking to us at Expert Talks at Mavris.
Thank you, Maha. Thanks for having me here today.
Great. So I wanted to start off, asking you about what do you think are some of the critical success factors that are important for analytics to make an impact in the business, right? And if you could also look at it from the context of the industry one operates in, the type of data maturity the organization itself has, and also are there any cultural ways of working at an organization level that impact the adoption and success of analytics initiatives?
Sure, absolutely. I think a great question. Something that as all analytics leaders we all struggle with, right? I mean, if you look at the kind of work that happens within the analytics space, it's a very broad space, and it ranges from all the way from data management, engineering, BI, business analytics, data science, even ML ops right now, right? I would say this is probably the different sets of job families that make up the larger analytics world today, and there could be more in the future, right? So a successful or an impactful analytics project, I think, begins with a well-defined problem. I think I want to start from basics, right? I mean,
Sure.
One is a very well-defined problem. I'm not saying we don't deal with vague problems, but all I'm trying to say is as an analytics practitioner, it is your responsibility to ensure that you're asking all the right questions to the business. Ensure your problem is well-defined and well-formulated. Many a times we are handed over with just some observations that the business users have, or some problems that they just want immediate solution for, but it's not necessarily a well thought out business problem, right? So I think that is very critical. The second is, of course, I would say alignment with the larger company goals, right? I mean, I can speak from a retail context. Let's say you are after improving your margin or profitability, right? That is one of your primary goals this year. Any impact that you want to make as an analytics project has to tie to this goal or one of the other sets of goals that the company has, right? We call it connecting the big Y, small y to the big Y, right? So it's very critical that you're able to understand, okay, I built this really cool analytics solution. Is it really going to help the retailer drive down margins? Drive up margins or increase profitability, right? So that is very critical. The third is, of course, sponsorship. Is this something that is a good to have? Like, you're probably dealing with maybe middle management layers within the business who are probably trying to make their lives easier, so they've reached out to the analytics team, right? I mean, we really want to do work on those kind of problems as well, but a business impact but the business impact can be driven only when there is sponsorship from the top. Is this even a priority for the CIO or the CFO of the company, right? Which is why aligning yourself to the big Y absolutely makes sense. Everybody's focused on that. If your project is actually leading to that, then you naturally get sponsorship, right? And then the fourth one is, of course, you spoke about the analytics maturity. I want to probably talk about data maturity, right?
Okay. Okay.
Um, many companies that I have been part of have been on a multi-year journey to get their data right. The
Hmm.
biggest challenge that we in analytics faced was the lack of single source of truth. I mean, you pull out sales numbers from the enterprise data warehouse, there is one number. There is finance, which is reporting a certain other number. Then there is maybe supply chain, which is reporting a certain other number. This is a real problem that a lot of
Absolutely.
retailers face, right?
Absolutely.
So when I go and present certain facts back to the business, especially to the senior leadership, how confident am I about the data that I'm even presenting, right? So it's very, very critical that your data is mature enough that everybody talks the same data. Everybody has access to single source of truth, be it about your company, be it about your customer, item, whatever, different sets of data that you have within the company. And this, I'm not saying, all the retailers that I've been part of, they're still on that journey, but they've made significant progress. That I can guarantee you, right? So an impactful analytics solution also needs to ensure that you are working on a really mature data, right?
Right.
Analytics maturity I mean, data maturity is a proxy for analytics maturity in a certain way, right? And then, of course, um, the last part that is very, very critical for me is, while you have defined the business problem, which is the first step, how are you able to translate the outcomes of whatever you have built back to the business? How are you able to explain, let's say, a model that you have developed which is going to optimize your margins or maximize your profits, right? How are you going to explain, if you are recommending certain levers that the business needs to pull to make that happen? How are you even going to convince the business to do that, right? It is not a set of numbers or a spreadsheet that you just ship out via email, and the business knows what to do with it, right?
Hmm.
In my experience, all the successful analytics implementations have happened only when the business knows, okay, this is definitely going to add value to them, right? Otherwise, these have always been academic exercises. The models are lying somewhere, or the dashboards are lying somewhere, right? So I think the last mile is very, very critical. And it is very important, which is why defining the problem, being able to align with the larger goal of the company. But the most critical part is, okay, now that you've built something, how are you convincing the business that they should be adopting this approach, or the new analytics solution that you have built, right? Very critical. And of course, you're also, from a after implementation, assuming all goes well, how are you measuring? How are you, working closely with the business, really able to come up with a measurement framework to measure the business impact? Some are
Absolutely.
hard benefits that you can easily measure, but some are maybe long term, right now soft, but over the long run, you're going to reap some benefits, right? So I think these are all very critical from a analytics success standpoint.
Very well articulated. And obviously every single point makes sense. And I personally have also seen the whole thing of last mile. I mean, many times we end up starting a project, right? And to me, last mile is almost genesis of everything. If you know how you're going to deliver the last mile, you define the problem right, you will engage well, you will know if it has got the sponsorship, right?
Yeah,
And in
yeah,
some sense, many times we end up starting a project somewhere for whatever reasons. And then, when we're moving towards it, we realize the last mile is a challenge. And possibly great solutions can't land, not just because of lack of explainability, but also because those practical levers or delivery mechanisms are not available in the business, right? It's a
agree.
constant problem, right? And
Yep,
data maturity. I mean, data maturity, I'm still to come across any organization, whatever levels of advancement in terms of, really having a single source of truth. I
yep,
mean, we talk of customer data platforms and all that, but even there, after putting all of them together, you still struggle with, really what is the truth.
correct.
Great. Now, you worked, you are almost like, for lack of a better word, you're a career retailer, right? And then,
Yep.
on the retail side of it, and across, four large retail, companies you have worked in. So I want to bring in this thing of context. How does one build context? So I was listening to I do some research before we do this. So I was listening to one of your presentations where you were trying to compare who's a better test cricketer between Sachin and, and Rahul
Dravid.
Dravid.
Yep.
And you're talking of, if you change the context, one appears a better cricketer than the other, right? You keep playing the figures and, if you torture the data, it will anyway tell you anything in terms of truth.
Correct.
You can make it, we can appear it as a truth, right? But the point is, when you bring in context, it becomes a lot more relevant, right?
Correct.
So how do you, and you have worked with a lot of, all four have been global capability centers, right?
Correct.
You would have had exposure working with the business, but you have worked here, and 17, 18 years back, while retail did exist, even today, the quality of retail in India and US, there's a huge difference in terms of,
Right.
retail maturity itself, right?
Sure.
So how does one go about, building this context from a GCC perspective? Let's say I'm a data analyst or data scientist in a global capability center, and
Right.
maybe it's a new industry. And let's say I'm new into a retail industry. So what are some of the things that I can do to build that, contextual awareness and, domain knowledge?
Sure. Okay. Absolutely. Great question. One is, I really think that it has to come from within. I was always intrigued by, retail as a domain, and how things operate. And I was always trying to make sense of, okay, this is what the numbers are telling me. What does it mean, right? So I was always trying to put myself in the shoes of the business, and that's something that I enjoyed. But there are some ways that I go about, or have done in the past, to build some domain knowledge. One is, anytime I join a new retailer, the first thing that I try to do is read up about them, try to understand. Like, if you look at Target, where I've worked, Target is a big box retailer which sells uh, across, it's not a specialty retailer, it's a mass merchandiser, right?
Correct.
It sells groceries, it sells apparel and accessories, it sells everything, right? It's probably a competitor to Walmart. So a big box retailer selling everything under one roof. Then I moved to Lowe's, which is a specialty retailer, which is a home improvement retailer, right?
Correct.
Retail, they both are retailers, but they're extremely different in what they sell, right? And then I moved to a luxury fashion retailer in HBC, right? Which is, I would say, again, a specialty retailer, but then your customer base is entirely different. It's luxury fashion. We are not selling milk and eggs, and our average order value is not $10. It is $500, right? And now I'm in Neiman Marcus Group, which is very similar. It's also a luxury fashion, right? But the point I'm trying to make is, even within retail, there is so much difference, right? But there are some fundamental commonalities across retailers, right? Like, everywhere it is called an SKU, stock keeping unit, right? So you basically start with uh, pulling some data. This is what I recommend to anybody that joins my team as well. Go into the data warehouse, just pull some 10 rows from most commonly frequently used tables, that we have. For instance, I go in and look at transactional data, right? I pull some information and try to see, okay, how is the data organized? I get to see that there are, there is something called as a hierarchy in the data, a merchandising hierarchy, right?
Correct.
In many companies, it is like a division, then there comes a department, there is class, there is product, there is
Classes.
item, right? So whatever it is, there is a merchandising hierarchy, right? You really need to understand from data, okay, okay, this is the merchandising hierarchy in the company, right? We have X number of divisions under which, we have 25 departments. And within each of these, in total, we have 100 classes, something like that. And in total, we sell about 50,000 items, unique items or SKUs in our company, right? This is, I would say, basics of knowing your company. This is how you build context. Then you go and pull some customer data. Try to understand what is our customer base. What are the active number of customers? What are customers that different types of customer segments. We probably have extremely loyal customers to maybe deal seekers or promotional shoppers, things like that, right? Try to understand. Data will tell you everything. A lot
Correct.
of context can be derived just by pulling data, trying to make sense out of it. Of course, if you're a first time in retail, pull the data, you still won't know what to do with it. Leverage some people, your manager or somebody in the company that has been there longer to help you understand what the data means. But start with data, right? Then you obviously have to leverage the internal, I would say confluence pages or any sort of like documentation that exists, right? When every time I've joined a new company, the intranet page is a fantastic source of a lot of information. I even start with basics of the company organizational chart, right?
Mm.
I mean, if you really want to feel being, belonged to a company. I don't know if belonged is even the right word, but if you really want to have that sense of belonging in a company, you really need to know the company first, right? Forget domain first, but know the company. Who's your CEO? Who's your CFO? Who's your COO, right? And then look at some organization charts. How are they organized? How is the supply chain team organized? Oh, within supply chain, I see there is logistics, there is distribution, then there is there is returns, for instance, there is customer service. There are many different divisions within supply chain. How are we organized? What do they do, right? So I think it starts with some curiosity, the underlying factor, but then these are some things that have helped me, right? I look at internet pages. In retail, there is something called as a retail calendar, right? There is something called as a fiscal year. Not all retailers follows, in India, our calendar year is April to March, right? Which is the financial calendar. But then in the US, a lot of retailers follow what we call a fiscal calendar. Many retailers follow a February to January fiscal calendar. And if you're a public company, every quarter they come out and talk about the company performance to the Wall Street, right?
Correct.
But some retailers follow a very different retail calendar, right? So, look for retail calendar, because when you pull data, if somebody says, can you provide data, weekly sales data by store for 2023, you should not start from Jan 1, 2023. You should look at the fiscal calendar and look at what was the day one of my fiscal year and till when should I pull the data in 2023, right? I think simple things like this is what will make us look good in front of our businesses. You don't want to pull data and they're like, oh, but you're showing me 2022 data because this is January 1st, which is last year for us, right? If you don't know that context, you're not going to be able to build trust with the business, right? So net what I'm trying to allude to is there are many different ways internally that you can try to build context. One is through data. One is through a lot of documentation, videos, training material that is available internally. And then, of course, you have to have a very strong orientation program. Anybody that joins the company goes through a set of trainings or orientation. Like for the first 2 days, and every time I've joined a new company, it has always been like, the first day is all about who we are, what do we do as a company, what is our history. We've been there for 100 years. How have we evolved as a retailer, right? Where are our distribution centers? Where are our stores? Who's our CEO? Who's our COO? So there is a lot of time spent in orienting new hires to what the company is, who we are, what we do, what we sell, and all that. Then the second day typically focuses on just your team level orientation. Okay, you're part of, let's say, marketing analytics. What do we do here? Okay, here are the different types of marketing campaigns that we run. Here is the different types of analytics that we do, right? Reporting, analytics, data science, whatever, right? So a strong orientation program is what can help you get started for sure. And then, of course, you build more context with pulling data, reading a lot of internal material, and all that. And a very, very useful information for me is what is called earnings release. I spend a lot of time. If you're a public listed company, you really need to go read the earnings release. It is typically an earnings call which the CEO, CFO, and all those executive leaders kind of go in front of many different analysts and talk about how their past quarter has been. And obviously, if you're a public company, there are expectations from the street, right, in terms of your performance. It could be earnings per share, it could be margin, it could be anything, right? So you're going to talk about what went well, what did not go well. We met expectations, or we exceeded expectations, things like that, right? And that is what dictates the share price of that company. So that earnings release is a fantastic document. You will be able to clearly understand how the executives are thinking about the business, how they are thinking about, let's say, the rest of the year, what is even happening in the outside economy, how are the analysts thinking about the company performance. So great context that you can get from the earnings release document. And then finally, I cannot stress on this. I have to stress on this that this is travel is absolutely essential. I think you really have to, at some point, not everybody gets to travel. At some point, I think if you get the opportunity, make it count. Visit the stores. Spend a lot of time in the stores trying to understand how a customer how you as a retailer are servicing the customer. What are the different sections within the store? How are they planning the planogram? How are they stocking up the back room? When does the truck pull in? How are they loading, unloading? How are they managing space, right? All those sorts of critical questions that you should be trying to answer for yourself. Spend definitely time in the distribution center, at least one distribution center, trying to understand. It's fascinating how distribution centers work. And and then, of course, if you have any other customer touch points, like maybe a contact center, if you get to spend some time in a contact center, if it is near shore within the US, for instance, right, or wherever you travel. I think travel is very, very critical. We used to call it the immersion trips. Unfortunately, because of the economy, because of remote working and all that, travel is not a really essential part of domain knowledge building right now. But I strongly vouch for travel. For everyone, spend 2 weeks closer to the business, really try to understand how exactly the business works, right? And then lastly, having experience leading also business functions. Like in my previous role at Saks Off Fifth, I used to lead all teams, including business operations teams. And those teams are very critical to understand business. So for instance, within merchandising, there used to be a team which used to onboard vendors, right? If you're onboarding a new vendor from whom you're procuring merchandise, we are onboarding a new vendor. We are also setting up items on the system, right? So those are teams which will help you really understand, how does the merchandising organization work within a retailer? What is the role of a buyer? What is the role of a planner? What is the role of operations, right? All those things will be like literally in front of your eye. You should be able to easily build context. So if you are working for a retailer which also has operations teams sitting right next to you, spend a lot of time with them. Try to understand what they do. Don't be just looking at your computer trying to make sense out of numbers all the time or do coding all the time. Spend some time with the operations teams as well. You will be able to connect a lot of dots and build the context that you need.
Oh, excellent. Very well and very deeply articulated. Thanks. And in fact, really knowing about the overall organization. And when I joined Tesco, right, and for most of us, and first time GCC guys, most of our company starts and ends with the GCC boundaries, right?
Correct.
And when you're part of Tesco or whichever organization, very few people actually go and figure out about what is the real. You would know a CEO and maybe a few other people because the names are fairly public, right? but really taking interest in terms of understanding the structure of the organization, the length and breadth of it, and reading a earnings release. I think it's a great way because it gives you context. And what also happens in the GCC world is you do get opportunities, but when you get that opportunity, you have to make it count in terms of, you said that sense of belonging, which the business sees in you, right? It is one is you feeling a sense of belonging. The other is the business leaders when they interact with you, they see a sense of curiosity and connect with the business, right? And it's extremely important, right? And the third one, which is also a learning I totally subscribe to, is about when you have other operations teams that you can really go and spend time. I see. I mean, if you're not in the business, obviously you can't see the elephant in one go. You will see the eyes, the trunk, and the tail and the legs part of it. But then over a period of time, it will start fitting into place.
Correct.
Wonderful. So, when I've been running analytics, and at least the last 7-8 years when I was in Landmark Group, a huge challenge is that there is this breakthrough, deep, insights and models one wants to provide, which is which is really deep and connects a lot of stuff. And there is this quick turnaround analytics, which is essentially businesses facing a particular pressure while you're trying to while you're trying to ensure that what you're doing is aligned to overall long-term goals of the organization or the objectives for that year or whatever. But there are realities that the business does have challenges, right? Suddenly sales is plateauing, a few stores are not performing, right? Maybe a competition has come nearby, conversion ratios have dropped, all of this stuff, right? And businesses actually reach out, saying that, I don't know how much it happens in the GCC world, but here they would reach out to the analytics end and say, "Just tell me what should I do," type of stuff.
Right.
And in many cases, they are looking for fairly simple stuff possibly. For them, it is like, tell me, what do I need to get to my next step, right? You build your long-term stuff, but, what do I do right now, right? So what according to you, and and given that for Neiman Marcus and all retailers go through this, right? And any business for this. So how should one look at it? What's a healthy mix of really looking at quick turnaround, reasonably fast moving 80-20 type of insights and move forward, and the ones which are really trying to generate a lot more of long-term strategic value for the company?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's always a what should I say, a tough balance to arrive at, especially when you have talent that aspires to do more, like cutting edge long-term projects, right? Whereas the need of the hour is only maybe like quick and dirty insights that could really help the business, right? From a leadership standpoint, it's a tough act. I can guarantee you that. So I don't have like a number that I would prescribe, right? But what I have always found it useful, especially when it comes to prioritizing what's important and what's not important, is a framework that somebody introduced to me at Lowe's. It's called run the business and move the needle, right?
Okay.
So
Nice.
Run the business is your typical quick turnaround. The turnaround time is typically 24 hours, 48 hours. At best, it can be a week, right?
Correct.
Because you're literally running the business. You have to keep the lights on, and anything that you do needs to enable the business to keep running, right? It is not going to change things dramatically for the business, but it has to ensure they keep running. Some examples, and typically, a lot of business intelligence, like it could be standard ad hoc reports, dashboarding, would probably come under this stream of work, right? And even when it comes to insights, it will be like an example that I could give you is a merchant or a buyer in the organization would reach out to you and try to understand, hey, this promotion kicked off last Thursday, and he's reaching out to you on a Monday, right? And he's trying to understand, can you tell me, how's it doing so far? Is there anything that we need to change in flight? Can I do something different, right? So you quickly pull together the numbers. You're trying to build a simple, maybe even an Excel report with some key callouts. Hey, this is what is happening. This seems to be performing well, but here are the opportunity areas, and here are maybe some 2 or 3 recommendations. You get into a call, you explain it further. These are, I would say, quick insights which are absolutely critical. I'm not saying these are not important. This is absolutely important. In fact, I would say 80% of what we do is this typically this, right? And then the move the needle is all the strategic projects, right? Um, a question could be, do I even need to run this promotion next year? That is probably a move the needle project. Or how do I optimize my promotions knowing my promo calendar for the past 2 years, 3 years, or whatever, right? How do I ensure that I maximize on certain metrics, which is profitability, customer acquisition, whatever be your objective of running a promotion, right? So these are, I would say, run the business versus move the needle kind of projects. And what has helped me is the 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 first run the business is what I call business analytics. There are, and in some companies even FP&A plays that role to a certain extent, right? Business analytics, very very critical. I'm a big proponent of the power of insights and adding value to the business. So I'm naturally biased towards business analytics, right? Move the needle is what I probably want my data science teams to focus on, right? And there again, I personally believe data science or the advanced analytics teams should only work on production problems or maybe capital funded projects, right? That way, and I've learned this through experience. Because we hire a bunch of data scientists, we want to build, let's say, a markdown optimization solution in house, right? The business has gone ahead and signed a contract with a third party provider for 5 years, right? Who is providing markdown optimization solution, which could even be a gold standard. So we are competing against a giant, and obviously the business is no way inclined to even do a proof of concept or test out what you have built. It becomes a pure academic exercise. On the other hand, if the business came to you and said, hey, my priority is to build a markdown solution, and I have $100 million allocated for this product, then there is value in hiring data scientists, data engineers, everyone building an in-house superior product which is very specific to the retailer, right? And an outside solution will be a one size fits all approach, whereas this would be very specific to the retailer. So that is what I call move the needle. Focus on things which are, and this also goes back to my earlier point about aligning yourself to the big why of the company, right? So if you know that this is the goal and this is the budget that is allocated to the goal, if you focus on all your move the needle efforts to that, then all your projects will get implemented or will be successful, right? Whereas most of the days, the analytics teams will be focusing on run the business projects. So from an operating model or a structure standpoint, your analytics center of excellence could be a federated model where you have business analysts and data scientists aligned to a particular business, or it could be a center of excellence where data science could be a horizontal, which is focusing on capital projects, and business analytics is focusing on your typical run the business kind of projects, right? So this is how I see. I clearly delineate based on the problem, but I'm naturally biased towards business analytics because that is where a lot of low-hanging fruits and quick wins are delivered. It helps us enable the trust building, which goes a long way.
No, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you are able to do quick turnaround business analytics insights, which you're able to connect with the business and create that trust. In fact, I think if you're able to build that, then all the more reason that business will trust you with large amounts of money for even doing those move the needle projects.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, one of the challenges that when from my own experience working analytics and when I was running the whole customer loyalty program and customer insights for landmark operators, whatever you build, a single source of truth, whatever extent possible. And you analyze, look at a lot of, customer segmentation, opportunity analysis, all that. But it's a very, very inside view of your customers. I mean, having a customer view is obviously better than having only the business view of it or the finance view of it. So customer view is a little more of a lead indicator in terms of how things are going, but still only about your customers and only that share of the wallet which they are spending with you, right? How important is outside in perspective, and especially in the context of business analytics, because when you want to connect. So one of the things you spoke about is earning release statements and all that, which gives you a possibly insight into the business of the company you're working. Equally, you could read out for other competition to get some sense, right? But that's a macro level information, right?
Yep.
But when you are really trying to solve a problem, which is, for example, my sales is plateauing or my store is degrowing, right? It could just be competition which is plonked a couple of stores there. And whatever you do, and even if you try and do inside out, you'll say, I'll rationalize the range, I'll improve the promos, I'll give more markdowns. But essentially, it's a battle you may or may not win because, the reality is the external perspective, factors that influence your sales degrowth, right?
Correct.
So how important is outside in perspective, and from a data perspective, how does one get access to that? And have you done anything like this? And any thoughts or any examples would be great.
No, absolutely. I think when we are when we are kind of scoping out a problem or rather a solution for a business problem, we spend a lot of time trying to understand what are all the possible hypotheses that we are going to test out, right? And hypothesis leads to what data do I need to test out that hypothesis. Invariably, I see the the outside in view as probably a brownie point that you can get by bringing in that perspective. Sometimes it has even been like a make or break, right? It's not necessarily just a brownie point. An example that I can give, right, is a lot of retailers spend quite some amount of money to get the competitive intelligence, right? There are many players in the market that have built products which are going to maybe, especially from an e-commerce standpoint, do web scraping, get a lot of information about the products that the competitors sell. Do I carry the same products that my competition carries? Like, especially from an assortment planning standpoint, right? What are the price points? Am I selling it higher, lower? What sort of promotions are they running? Are they giving free shipping? Are they giving free returns? Something like that, right? Buy online, pick up in store. So many things just by scraping competitor website. And this is a thriving business. There are many players in this space, but competitive intelligence has enabled retailers. I mean, you see Flipkart and Amazon like price by the hour, right? And the number is exactly the same. You look for an iPhone 15 on Amazon and Flipkart during Diwali, the price will exactly be the same. The only difference could be maybe some credit card offers between Amazon and Flipkart and all that. But how do they do that? It is that constant monitoring of competition. It's an outside in view, which enables retailers to, and it's become like table stakes right now. I think Flipkart or Amazon will lose out to competition if they don't do that. So it's an outside in perspective. That data is extremely crucial. Maybe another example that I can give is in one of my previous roles, we were supporting the loss prevention business, which was under the COO, Chief Operations Officer. Loss prevention is responsible for stopping the theft or store breakage, and shrinkage is a big metric that they're after, right? We were trying to build a model which would categorize the risk levels of stores, right? Ranging from maybe different levels, right? High, medium, low, super high, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 6 being the highest level of risk. And what the business does is they will plan their staffing models accordingly, right? Do we need to employ more security professionals in a high risk store? What sort of merchandise do we carry in high risk store? How many entries and exits do we need to have, right? A lot of planning goes behind how we categorize a particular store, right? The business already had a third party solution provide those numbers. Of course, that solution also takes into account a lot of crime data, right? From
Neighborhood
FBI,
review.
or about the neighborhood, right? uh, the way we were able to add value from a business analytics standpoint is, um, we try to look at we call it the trade area of that store, right? Which is typically 2 miles or 5 miles radius of the store. And we looked at, one insight that we already got was a lot of shoplifters were very young people, right? In the sense, anywhere between 16 to 22 years of age. This is also something that we were able to read up on the internet and try to get some insight. What we also looked for is the number of high schools in that neighborhood. Um, Number of, you'll be surprised. We looked at the number of pawn stores, right? Where people steal stuff, go and pawn it, right?
Okay. Wow.
Right. And this was something that it was an aha moment for the business. We were able to see that the higher the number of pawn stores in that neighborhood, the higher the riskier the store is, right? This is something that the business was really surprised that we even looked at that data, and we were able to use some Google APIs, free APIs, to get hold of that information, right? Just key in the zip code of the store, you get all this information within 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, and so on, right? And this was like fantastic information for the business. And we used it as an additional source to redefine whether the store continues to be risky or not, right? So these are some examples that I can think of. But external data, and even we look at maybe macroeconomic indicators like consumer confidence index, or employment rate, or many as a proxy for customer confidence. Are they going to come and buy discretionary items? Right. So a lot of external data goes into everyday decision making, and it's something that folks in analytics should always look out for.
No, the sponsor is a great example. It's like a data or a solution innovation type of stuff. You almost draw a parallel. Some of it comes out of some brainstorming and all that. I remember long back when I was at CP, we used to open cyber cafes. Those days, cyber cafes was a big business, and you had to do a lot of research. Ki cyber cafe paise banayega ki nahi. And research is a costly thing for a startup, right?
Right.
And then somebody came out with an idea saying that what is the profile of customers you're looking for. And then the brainstorming saying parallel industry, which company or industry, company in that industry is likely to mirror the type of profile that we are looking for. So CP in those days was this bold, risk-taking type of company, and the profile of brand would attract that type of people was the feeling, right?
Right.
And you looked around and you said, okay, ICICI Bank essentially had this brand of being, very fast, very agile, willing to take risks. That was its brand those days. And then somebody came out with the idea saying that, okay, wherever ICICI Bank is opening an ATM, right? You could maybe, start focusing, pick those areas and research them instead of going all across and researching.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it's not analytic, but I'm just saying it's a way of solution innovation, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Excellent. So I know we are also the time. If you can, indulge for 2-3 more minutes.
Sure.
If we talk of analytics and don't speak of generative AI, then then somebody would say that we really are not AI or analytics professionals today, right? So what's your thought on some of the latest or some of the newest in terms of use cases that they are seeing in generative AI in a very practical context, right? I know there's a lot of things in terms of generative AI being used for content generation, all that type of stuff. But in the real world, where do you see it getting applied? Are you already seeing something?
Absolutely. I think there are, and large language models, at least for tech companies, is not new, right?
Correct.
Generative
Correct.
AI became a phenomenon because of ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Everybody's talking about it, right? But
Yeah.
there are companies that have been investing a lot of effort and research on large language models, and it has probably become more popular right now. So lots of use cases have been identified in retail. Um, and of course, I think there are some inherent challenges, especially from a infrastructure, from a funding standpoint. I mean, would you rather invest $100 million in, maybe making your supply chain better, or are you going to invest in generative AI? So the trade-offs is what a lot of maybe struggling companies are thinking about. But a lot of thriving companies, they're already well ahead in the Gen AI journey, right? Some use cases, I think content creation is probably the most obvious use case that everybody's even talking about, and it's out there already, right? Be it Amazon, Flipkart, they're using Gen AI to create images of models on their websites, right? I think what Amazon also is doing, and they're probably doing a beta test right now, is they are summarizing product reviews. You go and look for maybe a Nike shoe on Amazon, and it is go and let's say it has 78,000 reviews, right?
Mm, mm,
Average rating is 4 stars.
mm,
But you probably want to read through a lot of reviews to make a decision. Amazon summarizes all the reviews in 100 words or 150 words, and it makes that customer experience and that shopping much, much easier for a customer, right? Fantastic use of generative AI. I think Google also launched sometime in June the virtual trial room sort of an
mm,
application, right?
mm,
Um,
mm.
you've already seen that in LensCart if you want to
Correct.
test out the different spectacles, right, for your face and all that. Something similar to that is what Google has launched, and many retailers are already talking about it, right? How can we make the try on more easy and a better experience for our customers? I think some really good use cases are in operations, especially in supply chain, where people are talking about AI augmented customer care. Right.
Mm,
I think literally real time, what should I say, analysis of what the customer is calling you for
mm.
and prompting the agent to with a certain set of responses, right? So that kind of is probably where customer care is moving towards. It's augmenting, it's not replacing agents, it's augmenting the agents to provide better customer experience, customer service, and in the end, improve CSAT scores for the retailer, right? I think these are some use cases that I can think of. There are much, much more in marketing, of course, email marketing specifically. How can you be like, how can you, what should I say, tailor every email message, uh,
Personalize it.
personalize it to the end user, including the subject, the body of the email, not just the promotions, right? So there are lots of use cases being discussed, and like I said, maybe the economically financially struggling retailers are still trying to prioritize what's important and what's not, because it definitely involves, it's a long-term investment and a significant capital investment, right? So, but everybody's exploring proof of concepts, that's for sure.
Because I think I heard Akhilesh Teja is it in one of those conferences speak about saying predictive AI is like your wife and generative AI is like your neighbor's wife type of stuff, right? I mean, that is where the glamour is, but the reality is, how much of value it is generating I mean, apart from the content creation part, one has to still figure out because generative AI by nature is more growth oriented. I mean, that's what
Correct,
you would think, right? And it's
correct.
a very different one to measure, difficult one to measure in terms of have you really contributed to growth or
Sure.
it is just the interesting. Thank you so much for making time. Pleasure talking to you. I mean, I learned a lot through the last 1 hour of chatting. And
Sure.
once again, thank you so much and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maha. Thank you for this opportunity once again. I think this is a topic that's close to my heart, so I'm absolutely delighted that you gave me this opportunity. And if I can be of any help to any data science or analytics aspirants, absolutely would love to get into many more such conversations with you. So pleasure talking to you as well.
Thank you, Vinod. Thanks again.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.